Welcome to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss, coming to you almost live and direct here from Cable Television City in the west side of Chicago, and I'm grateful that you're tuning in tonight because I'm shaken but never stirred. We're going to talk a lot about faith without works tonight. Okay? What is faith if I'm not working at something? Now, I was having a conversation before the show with my big red nose. I look like Rudolph tonight. I wasn't drinking or anything like that, but somehow I bruised the tip of my nose, and our makeup person couldn't cover it, so I'm like, I think it's bringing out the Irish in me or something else. So I'm going to try to behave myself tonight, as I always do, try to be a gentleman, as I usually am, and talk about this very interesting thing called faith without works. Now, I cracked a joke about shaken but never stirred. I went through something a couple weeks ago where a job came to an end, and it kind of shook me a little bit because it was a mutual parting of ways. I wish it was on better terms, but I think there comes a point in time when, somehow the higher, the universe or something else, some people call it God, some people call it the universe, come together and get us out of a situation. It gets us out of a comfortable yet uncomfortable rut. Now, what are we talking about? An uncomfortable, comfortable rut is something that I accept in my life, okay, whether it's a relationship, a job, or a state of being, right? A state of being, a state of my mind, whatever it is. And when I'm no longer happy in that situation, I have fallen into that uncomfortable part of that comfortable rut. All right, so let's talk about a job. What changes in a job? Oftentimes personalities change in a job. But what else? Money changes in a job. So if I'm making less money in a job, I'm going to be less likely as time goes by, especially if I've been there for a long time or a long while, that I'm going to not accept certain things because I'm not making as much money. Does that make sense? So I'm willing to eat more crow, as they say, because I'm making money, and that's what you do. But what happens when that job changes and you start making less money? Well, I'm comfortable because I've been there for a while, right? I know everybody, I know the customers, I know this, I know that, I know the job. But I'm uncomfortable because I'm not making the money I used to. And more often than not, I'm becoming less tolerable of other people's mistakes. When I'm making money, I can shake it off because I'm making money. So this one may cost me a little bit, but it's okay, I'm going to make it on the next time. But as business starts drying up and other people's mistakes are costing me money and I'm not making as much money as I did, I become very intolerable about that. And it helps make me uncomfortable. However, I'm still comfortable because I've had that job and that longevity, and it shows that I'm able to hold on to a job. But what am I doing? I'm really kind of torturing myself and being unhappy. So sometimes we're kind of shaken when something comes to an end, whether it's on our own accord or a combination of a mutual parting of the ways, as they say. When we part ways, we break up and we go our own way. And that's what we do. So how do we pick up those pieces, and how do we go on and make that next step? And that's what we were talking about before the show tonight. I saw Janice come in. I felt like I dumped on her for a second. I said, please excuse me for dumping on you, but this is what I'm thinking. And she said, you know what? This is all about goal setting. And, I'm like, how do you get out of this pattern of thinking or this pattern of living? And as a counselor, it's always easy to point it out in other people and say, oh, well, you know what, you might want to do this. But when it's me, I don't have that other counselor in my life. And I'm supposed to have the answers, but I don't always have the answers for myself. And that's why it's important to always have people in my life to talk to. And I'm grateful tonight that I had someone to speak with. But we're going to be talking about faith without works, being shaken out of that comfortable zone, and then figuring out how to move on to that next level. So these are things that I'm working on in my life, and And so what we're going to do tonight is kind of problem solve and come up with some solutions, and I'm glad you're joining us. In the meantime, I'm Greg. This is the Greg Struss Show, seen every Wednesday night here on Comcast Xfinity at 8 o'clock and on YouTube.com. I'm glad you're joining us. Thank you for being with us, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss. And before the break, we were talking about change, right? Not change for a 50, not change for a 20, but when change happens rapidly and that we have a choice and maybe not have a choice. I think that when we start speaking up about certain things that we're making a choice, because sooner or later, when we're becoming more vocal about things, things kind of come to a head, like in a relationship. In any kind of relationship. So if we don't feel a mutual sense of respect and we don't feel respected, what kind of comes into play there? So am I, I have to be respectful of the fact that somebody's employing me and that I have to act a certain way. But if someone's employing me and disrespecting me, I have choices I can make. Now, a lot of times people don't make choices because they're in that comfortable, uncomfortable rut. Oh, I got kids in school, or I got a car payment, or, what am I going to do? So we settle for less than what we want because we're comfortable. Never mind what else is out there. So this is helping me tonight because I'm kind of talking to myself as I'm sharing this with you. Maybe you're in a situation, okay? Let's keep in mind. We're talking jobs tonight, but where are things that we accept? What are other areas in our life that we accept less than what we want? I see in a lot of personal relationships, all right? One of the things that men used to talk, there was a joke one time that a man called into a radio talk show host and said, I don't understand why my wife left me. I gave her a house, I gave her a car, I gave her, all these things. And the radio host asked, but did you ever tell her you loved her? So yeah, I gave a good living. I gave a nice thing, but I really wasn't a good communicator, and it was based on material things. So what happened? The wife was in a comfortable yet uncomfortable rut and finally made the decision to say, you know what? I don't need this anymore because material things don't matter more than my emotional state of, well-being. And communication comes into that. I think it's very important. So when we're in a long-term job, and I'll give you my own example. I used to go, every 2-3 years it was a different kind of job because I thought, something else was going to come along. So I tried my hat in different things because, show business didn't work out. All right, it didn't work out that way. So I had to do something. And then I ran into the criticism of, well, why are you doing that? Well, I needed to do something. All right, and I need my peace of mind. My mental health is very important. And when a job starts getting to be too much, then it's time to start listening to my body and saying, you know what? Yeah, maybe I'm not going to make as much money right away, but I'm going to have a thing called self-respect. I respect myself more because I'm getting out of a situation that's no longer tolerable for me. Oh, but you got to work more hours. Yeah, but I don't have to see you anymore. I don't have to deal with a coworker anymore. I don't have to play any kind of game. Yeah, now I go to a new place, I got to figure out the game. But it's refreshing because I'm now shaken and like, wow, I'm the new guy again. And I got to prove myself all over again. So there are good things, I think, that come out of change because, it gets me out of my way of thinking. Now, I can't expect to go to a new employer or into a new relationship and expect things to be the same. Because why? I've got to go through that point of getting to know people and people getting to know me. And that's scary. It really is. And I'm sorry, I don't care how old people are. People used to say, well, once you get to be 50, it's hard to get a job. Or once you're 55, you can't get a job anymore. And I think really there's an attitude with that, well, I'm old. I don't think it's so much being old. I think in changing this way of thought, and I was talking about this before the show, I think that one of the reasons why people don't hire, or the belief is that people after 50 don't get hired, isn't because they're old or they have to be paid more. It's because we're less moldable, right? We're less tolerable to other people trying to change us. So like that new employee, Janice was talking about before the show about getting a dog, a puppy. The puppy's excited, all right? The older dog's not excited. I still think you can teach an older dog new tricks, but they're more settled in their ways. And I think that this is where kind of law enforcement is missing it, because they always want to go for the young people. Young men, I think young women are more mature than young men in most cases. But young men, what? They have the physical agility, right? They're stronger, supposedly, faster, but they lack that life experience and maturity that somebody older can bring to that street situation. So whereas the police officer that's 49 has grown in that job and grown in his life and been through different life experiences, he or she brings something more to the table, I think, on a maturity level, and can diffuse situations rather than throwing down. However, older people, and I speak for myself, are less likely to, I don't want to say be teachable. I feel I'm very teachable. I like being taught. I like learning new things. But when it comes to belief systems, I think we're kind of a little more set in our ways on what we are willing to do and what we're not willing to do. I'm willing to do whatever in a job. That obviously is honest and ethical. But being told that the sky is blue when it's green, I don't know if I can go for that. I might be able to, depending on what kind of mood I'm in. So where does faith come into all of this? Now, some people will say, oh, there you go, talking about God again. It's not, faith doesn't necessarily mean that it's God. And so what if it is? To me, it's God. To you, it may be someone else. It might be something else. Faith doesn't necessarily mean organized religion. What faith means is that, I have a belief in something that's greater than myself. If I don't have faith going in through my life, that things are going to work out, or that things are going to go a certain way and hopefully work out for the better, then what do I have? I got to work on it, right? Because faith without works is really what? It really isn't faith. It's kind of being lazy and complacent. So if I have faith that things are going to work out, I have to take steps in making things work out. Okay? There was an old saying that God helps those who help themselves. Why is that? Because faith takes effort. God's busy. God has millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people to deal with. And the more that I can do to help God and help Greg, the better likely that I think things are going to work out. Now, that also involves taking action and taking a step. Like, oh, well, I want to do this, but how do I do it? Well, I have to come up with that goal and start working on it. And it's kind of frightening when you haven't been goal-oriented for a while and you lose sight of that. But I think it's kind of like, working out at one point in your life. The muscles come back. So in putting that effort, if I had a certain amount of success doing something when I was younger, I think I can do it again once I get rid of that fear and have faith. But faith and fear, I think fear doesn't really require action, does it? If I'm afraid of something, if I want to overcome that fear, it takes action because I got to face that fear. So I think that's kind of intriguing on a certain way. But when something gets taken away from us, it's jarring. It really is. And I understand when people lose a job and the factory closed or whatever, instead of looking at it as an opportunity because, oh, wow, I got rent to pay, I got bills to pay, I start thinking about what? Well, what am I going to do? I had this job all this time, and I don't know what else do I do? I have the ability to learn, right? Because I'm a human being. And just because I didn't go to school, or just because I don't like to read, or just that I don't care to write, doesn't mean that I'm not able to do it. It means that I have to make the effort. And depending on how badly I want it, what's the result? So again, these are all things that I have been thinking about in the last week, and I think it's important to share it with you because change involves a lot of things. I think change involves obviously people, places, things, especially in addiction, because if I'm hanging around with the same people that I've been using with or drinking with or gambling with or whatever it is, and then I, seek help and then come back to these people, chances are likely I'm going to do it again. Why? Because I'm with the people that I did it with. So change involves changing the people, changing the place, and changing the things. How does that figure into a job? Well, I'm no longer working with those people that I worked with for all those years. I'm no longer at that same place every day. I don't see the same people, and I'm not doing the same thing. And it's uncomfortable. Even if I do the similar job someplace else, I've changed my people, I've changed my places, and I've kind of changed my things. Now I need to work on changing my perspective on what I think it is that I need to do next. So it was interesting because I was talking with somebody today who's a member of an organization, and he was arrested. And every time I see him, he's always arrested for something else. And he was talking to me about his organization, and I'm sure you can read between the lines of what I'm saying, and has 2 young children. And I asked him point blank, this is a 25-year-old man, I'm like, so don't you think your kids, your babies, deserve to have a father in their life? Oh yeah, we do stuff all the time. I said, but what kind of father are you going to be able to be if you're locked up? If you go to the penitentiary, your babies don't get to see you. What is that about? Do you think about that stuff? And then he brought up something that was very interesting to me, and it hit me several hours later as I came to the studio and talked about it. What happens when I'm in a situation that I don't feel I can get out of? Now, in a gang, people get caught in that, and they feel that they can't get out of it. But what about life decisions? What about those jobs I've been working that I managed to fall into that same job? How do I get out of that? And that's what we're going to delve into when we come back. I'm Greg, this is The Greg Show, and thank you for watching. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss. Before the break, we were talking about faith without works, okay? And also getting into a situation where I continue to fall into the same patterns of thinking or doing. I was talking about a young man I had spoke with who I don't know him real well, but I've known him. And every time I talk to him, he's always just either had a warrant served or something else. And I feel badly about that. And I said, he's a good kid. And somebody told me, well, he's not a good kid because he's not doing good things. And when I was doing counseling with people who were always in trouble with the police, I said, he's a good kid. Well, what do you mean by that? He's a good kid making poor decisions. Just because somebody is involved in criminal activity doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil. Just because somebody took someone's life doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil. It means that they have a problem and that they haven't made good decisions. Now they're going to say, oh, Greg, what are you talking about? There you go again being, I get accused of this. You just look at the good in people. Well, if I don't look at the good in people, I'm going to be one miserable human being. And I try to look at the good in people because I want people to see the good in me. I don't want to be judged on one thing I did in my life that maybe wasn't so good, or maybe a couple things that weren't so good. So as these troubled people would come in and seek treatment, whether it was through court mandated mom mandated, dad mandated, family mandated, wife mandated, husband mandated, we would talk. And I would have conversations. And when I talked about somebody who was 24, I said, he's a good kid. You know, I remember when people would call me a kid and I was 24. And I'd be so angry because I'm not a kid, I'm 24 years old. I mean it with respect when I say he's a good kid. He's mixed up, he's making poor decisions. And we have to pay for those decisions when we're breaking the law and doing things that are not good. So just because I'm not doing good doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not good. It means that I'm not doing what I need to do. And I'm going to have to answer to that. I really believe it. I really believe in karma. And of course, depending on where I am in my belief system, I might say it's a God thing. You know, I'll be punished one way or the other if I know the difference between right and wrong. And I have yet to meet somebody that doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. Yet they're going to work the system because it's easy. But it really isn't, because why? When I work the system, it's kind of like working a hustle. I got a 50-50 shot of making that sale, or a 50-50 shot of getting busted. But when I do get busted, all bets are off. And was it really worth it? Was it really easier? You know, like today, people don't understand. You get into a fight with people today, a family fight or anything. You get locked up and you got to go to court. You know, if you haven't killed somebody or you haven't injured someone seriously and you don't go to jail, you go to classes for a year, depending on how severe the charge is. So yeah, I always tell the young guys, I say, oh yeah, that machismo is all great. But so you're going to beat somebody up who called you a name, who doesn't matter to you, and you're going to have to pay all that money and be tied up in the system for 2.5 years. I remember someone the other day hit someone in a parking lot, and they were a little inebriated, a little intoxicated, young guy. And I just said, look, you know, I'm not getting into your business or anything, but you do not want to get a DUI. Because a DUI means you lose your car, you lose your job, you lose your place to live in most cases. You got stiff fines if you don't go to jail, and depending on if you're a repeat offender, you have a year to go to classes. It's about a 2.5-year deal. And anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000, $5,000 and $12,000, $5,000 and $20,000. Do you want to go through that? For what? It's not worth it. People do go through it, and there's a lesson to be learned. But I'll tell you what, I don't understand why somebody would want to go through it 2 or 3 times. So, again, that accountability comes in, and what am I settling for? Am I having faith? Am I falling into a pattern of thinking that's not good for me? And I was having this conversation, and I said, you know, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this situation? I was just thinking out loud before the show, and I said, thank you for listening to me, because I just needed to kind of empty it all out, like I do on the show. And I leave here tonight, and I feel like, you know, in what I'm sharing about this, and hopefully coming up with solutions as I think and help and all those things. But it's serious, and what am I settling for, and why am I settling for it? I don't have to settle for it. You know, and regardless of what happened, I have the capability to change, and I have to believe in that, and stop being an idiot and just start getting to work on it, right? Because that's what we got to do. We got to take action, and if we're not taking action, then we're going to continue being where we don't want to be, in that uncomfortable, comfortable rut. Now, I can go from one comfortable, uncomfortable rut into something that will become, again, a comfortable, uncomfortable rut. Now, the real discomfort comes from breaking the pattern and doing something completely different, and doing something new, and taking that risk, and having that reward in the end. So I know what I need to do now, and thank you for listening. And when we come back, everybody's just kind of looking at me. We're going to wrap it up with some final thoughts. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss, and I'm not Rudolph, but I notice I have like a bruised nose tonight. People are like, you're supposed to look perfect when you're on TV, right? Everybody always looks like perfect when they're on TV, and I'm just telling you I'm an imperfect man and and I'm proud of it. Okay, do you see that? Okay. So much for vanity in this day and age. All right, so we talked about a lot of things tonight. Having faith with working at faith, and having faith that when I get out of one situation and I take a step back, sometimes I have to take a step back to take a step forward. I have to keep that in perspective that, you know what, I just made a change and I'm capable of making that next change, that I'm not going to allow myself to get into a comfortable yet uncomfortable rut, which allows me to not excel at the things that I want to do and be the person I want to be. Why? Because out of fear of change, fear of failure, fear of success. Success, I don't know, I'm 50 years old now and I've had a fear of success. And now I'm like, it's time to get over it because I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to do what I've been doing. Now I enjoy doing this and I enjoy doing the things I like in my life, but this was not my life plan. So it's important to become goal-oriented. And how do we do that? I remember when I was younger, I always wrote my goals. I always worked on it and was very diligent. And then one day, I don't know, it was like I stopped setting goals, and years later, this is what happens. So if I have the ability to set goals and make changes in my life and go after the things that I want, it involves belief, right? Some people say the belief in the higher power, belief in God, but really all that doesn't matter if I don't believe in Greg, all right? So I have to believe in myself that I have the capability to succeed and be successful doing what I want to do in my life because I have the experience, I've had the exposure, and taking that step and picking up that 1,000-pound phone, as we say, and introducing myself and getting that meeting and getting in there and getting it going. So people become self-employed every day. It's kind of frightening. But in this day and age, I think it's necessary to have 2 or 3 jobs and a side hustle going because more often than not, one of them might fall to the wayside. And a lot of jobs aren't paying what they used to pay. Do you know how many people that were lawyers that were making $250,000 a year ended up going to, and they never worked these jobs before, like a Home Depot or a Walmart because they needed to work. And you want to talk about a major change and a major reality check going from $250,000 a year, highly educated, to making minimum wage? But they took a step back in order to gain a perspective and figure out what they wanted. And I found more often than not, people that make a lot of money don't like what they're doing. And to me, I don't care if I make a lot of money. I'd like to make enough to live, to have some savings. I don't need to drive an expensive car. I want to live within my means, have low stress, and a happy life. But that's just me. So anyway, we talked about a lot tonight. I hope you got something out of it. We try to talk a little bit about this, a little bit about that, and hopefully come up with some solutions. So I hope this helped you tonight. And I appreciate you tuning in every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock here on Channel 18, and of course on YouTube.com with the solution.